Was the biblical flood local or global? Scriptures, logic, and geology will decide if the flood was global or local. Let's begin our investigation by first reading the scriptures.
Chapter 6. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
If the flood is local, and let's say it happened around the Black Sea or Mesopotamia, since some people subscribe to those locations, according to Genesis chapter 6 verse 1, it reads, Men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them. Skeptics of a global flood try to say the word earth doesn't mean earth, but land. However, this makes very little sense, because wouldn't men be multiplying and having daughters all over the earth and not just one particular part of the land? Furthermore, Genesis chapter 6 verse 3 gives the reason for the flood. Genesis chapter 6 verse 3 reads, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So the question I have is this verse only talking about the location that Noah is at? The Most High Spirit will not strive with man forever, only around the Black Sea or Mesopotamia? Or is this verse saying all over the planet? Genesis chapter 6 verse 4 adds more important details. Genesis chapter 6 verse 4 reads, Giants on the earth. The sons of God came unto the daughters of men. They bore children to them. Again, is this only occurring in the local area that Noah lived, or is this global? To me, it would seem like if this was local, the Most High would just call Noah and his family to leave the region, just like when he told Abram and his family to leave, or when he told Lot and his family. However, if the events described in Noah's time are global, then there isn't anywhere to flee to. After all, Genesis chapter 6 verse 1 says, Men began to multiply on the face of the earth. This is clear evidence that there is nowhere for Noah and his family to flee to. These events are happening all over the earth. And the next verse is clear of that fact. The flood was likely global because of the reason for it. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5 says, The wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was evil continually. Is this only happening locally around the Black Sea or Mesopotamia? Only where Noah lives, there were wicked men whose thoughts are evil continuously? Or is this happening all over the earth? Well, the verse says what it says, the earth. Genesis chapter 6 verse 6 proves that it's all of mankind, not just where Noah lives. Genesis chapter 6 verse 6 says, The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. He was grieved in his heart. Again, is this only in the Black Sea region or Mesopotamia? Or is this verse referring to all of mankind on the earth? at the time of Noah? Well, it literally says it in Genesis chapter 6, verse 7. This verse establishes that the flood had to be a global event. Genesis chapter 6, verse 7 reads, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things, and birds in the air. I am sorry that I have made them. Again, I ask, is the Most High only going to destroy man, beast, creeping things, birds, only around the Black Sea or Mesopotamia, or off the face of the earth? Furthermore, is the Most High sorry that he had made man and all these other creatures in Noah's local region, or on the face of the earth? The following verses seem to imply it's a worldwide event.
These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth.
Genesis chapter 6, verse 11 illustrates why the earth will be destroyed. Genesis chapter 6, verse 11 reads, The earth also was corrupt. The earth was filled with violence. So again, I ask, is this only near the Black Sea or Mesopotamia? The scriptures are clearly saying more than once that the earth was corrupt and violent, not just Noah's local region. Genesis chapter 6, verse 12 backs this up. Genesis chapter 6, verse 12 reads, God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Is all flesh only near the Black Sea or Mesopotamia, or is all flesh on the earth? Was all flesh only corrupt in Noah's local region, or was all flesh corrupted on the earth? The scriptures say it was the earth. After all, if humans were uncorrupt and better outside of where Noah lived, then why could Noah just leave that corrupt region that he lived in, like Abraham and Lot? Why does Noah have to stay in a single evil location? Unless, like what Genesis chapter 6 verse 12 reads, all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. There was nowhere for Noah and his family to run to. This corruption and wickedness was happening all over the planet. But let's return to the scriptures.
And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. And everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus did Noah. According to all that God commanded him, so did he.
The scriptures repeat the message for the destruction and why it's happening. Genesis chapter 6 verse 13 reads, "The end of all flesh. The earth is filled with violence. I will destroy them with the earth." Reading the text is clear. All flesh will end off the earth because of their wickedness. This doesn't sound local, like it's just happening in Mesopotamia or near the Black Sea. The creation of the ark is even more evidence as to why it's global. Genesis chapter 6 verse 14 through 16 says, "Make yourself an ark, length 300 cubits, width 50 cubits, height 30 cubits, lower, second, and third decks." Now that's actually one massive ship for a local flood. And just to put into perspective, Noah's ark was in length 300 cubits, which equals to about 510 feet. The width was 50 cubits, which equals to 85 feet. And the height was 30 cubits, which equals into 51 feet. And the length of that is basically 1.5 football fields, and the width is about 2 school buses, and the height is 3 giraffes stacked on top of one another, and the volume is 483 semi-trucks. So as you can imagine, that is actually a massive, massive ship. So why go through so much work to build such a massive ship if the flood is local? Obviously, the ship couldn't have been made within a week. Some believe it took about 120 years to build the ship, with only Noah and his 3 sons, with the tools that they would have had back then. But for the sake of argument, let's say it took about a year or even a month, heck, a week to build the ark. In all of that time and hard work put into creating an ark, why couldn't Noah and his family just leave the Black Sea or Mesopotamia, where the flood was going to take place? If the flood was coming in 120 years, 1 year, 1 month, 1 day, or even 1 hour, Noah would have had plenty of time to leave. He knew it was coming. He knew ahead of time. So why go through so much time and work to build an ark if the flood was literally years away? Noah likely had years to leave, more than enough time to pack up and leave, just like Abraham and Lot did. But sticking with the interpretation that it took 120 years to build the ark, Noah and his family could have been long gone out of the flood's reach if it was local. They could have been in Arabia or India or North Africa, anywhere in the world, in the amount of 120 years. However, if the flood was global, then it makes more sense as to why Noah had to build such a large ship. There's literally nowhere to run to if a global flood is coming. And remember what the scriptures say: all flesh over the face of the earth is about to be destroyed. The evidence of this is in Genesis chapter 6 verse 17. Genesis chapter 6 verse 17 reads, "I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth, destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die." It's very clear that the Most High is going to destroy the earth with a flood, and that all flesh with the breath of life, everything on earth shall die. Now, does this sound local? Of course not. The scriptures keep re-emphasizing key words such as earth, all flesh, breath of life, everything. I don't think this is happening only where Noah lives. Clearly, this seems to be global. Genesis chapter 6 verse 19 through 20 establishes this very fact. Genesis chapter 6 verse 19 through 20 reads, "Of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort. They shall be male and female." The Most High clearly wants Noah to save every living creature, not some or a few in the local region like in Mesopotamia or the Black Sea, but all. Now, if this was a local flood, why would Noah have to save any animals? Most of the time, animals can sense when a flood is happening and they leave. why didn't the animals just leave? Also, why would the Most High tell Noah to save animals when the same animals exist outside of Noah's local region? Any animals you can find around the Black Sea and Mesopotamia, you can find pretty much outside of that single location. Therefore, why save the animals? Perhaps the reason animals didn't leave the region, and perhaps the reason the Most High told Noah to save male and female of every living thing of all flesh, is because the flood is going to destroy all flesh. But now let's read chapter 7.
Chapter 7. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth, for yet 7 days. And I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him into the ark, because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days, that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights.
Genesis chapter 7 verse 1 through 3 re-emphasizes again that Noah is saving all animals. Genesis chapter 7 verse 1 through 3 reads, 7 each of every clean animal, a male and his female, 2 each of animals that are unclean, a male and his female, to keep the species alive on the face of all the earth. Noah is saving these animals, both male and female, to keep the species alive on all the face of the earth. This type of wording doesn't sound like a local flood, but a global one. Noah has to save these animals because if he doesn't, the species will die out. Also, if it were a local flood, why would Noah have to, and I quote from Genesis chapter 7 verse 3, keep the species alive on the face of the earth? Again, the same animals that would have existed in Noah's local region, whether it's the Black Sea or Mesopotamia, would have existed outside of those areas. Also, why would a local flood wipe out all animals? This is why a global flood makes more sense. Furthermore, Noah was told to save birds. Why would Noah have to save birds if the flood was local? Couldn't birds just fly away from the local flood zone? Birds fly away from natural disasters like local floods all the time. And birds fly great distances all the time when they migrate hundreds of miles away. Therefore, why would Noah have to save birds near the Black Sea or Mesopotamia when those same birds could have just flew to safer and drier land in the surrounding area, such as Arabia, other parts of the Mediterranean, North Africa, India, etc.? The only reason why birds couldn't survive the flood mentioned in Genesis is if it was a global flood. That's why Noah had to save the birds that could have otherwise flew away if it was a local flood. Genesis chapter 7 verse 4 clearly states again the great power of the flood. Genesis chapter 7 verse 4 reads, I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things. You can't get any clearer than this. The Most High's plan with the flood is to destroy all living things from the face of the earth. Genesis chapter 7 verse 7 clearly says that Noah's family entered the ark along with the animals. Genesis chapter 7 verse 7, Noah and his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives. of clean animals, of animals that are unclean, of birds, of everything that creeps on the earth. 2 by 2, they went into the ark. This means the only people that will survive the flood is Noah's family and the animals on the ark. Genesis chapter 7 verse 11 says, "The foundation of the great deep were broken open." Now this is a powerful verse because it actually can prove a global flood. This verse is talking about water bursting forth from the ground, basically underwater subterranean chambers, which actually exists in geology. We'll cover this very soon because, as I stated earlier, it can prove a global flood. But this verse clearly points out that it didn't just rain for the flood to happen, but water came shooting out of the ground as well. For people that support a Black Sea or Mesopotamian local flood, there really isn't any evidence of a local flood in that region in which underwater chambers burst out of the ground. But let's return to the reading of the scriptures.
In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark. They, and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth. And the waters increased, and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. And the waters prevailed, and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl, and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days.
Genesis chapter 7 verse 13 through 16 repeats what previous verses have already said. Genesis chapter 17 verse 13 through 16 reads, "Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Noah's wife, and their 3 wives of his sons, entered the ark. Every beast after its kind, every creeping thing, every bird went into the ark, 2 by 2, in which is the breath of life, male and female of all flesh. Only Noah's family and the animals were allowed to survive what was to come." The following scriptures describe how destructive this flood would be, and that this flood had to have been global. Genesis chapter 7 verse 20 perfectly illustrates how it is impossible for the flood in Genesis to be local. Genesis chapter 7 verse 20 reads, "The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered." The flood waters went above the mountains, and not only did the waters reach above the mountains, it went 15 cubits above the mountains. Now, for people that subscribe to a Black Sea region or Mesopotamian flood, how does that work? The water went above the mountains in Noah's local region, killing off all of wicked mankind in the local area, but didn't spill over into nearby neighboring regions. The water just stopped and only flooded where Noah lived. And if that's the case, why didn't people just leave the region that Noah lived in once people saw that the waters were getting dangerously high? The wicked people could have just escaped the flood and went to the part of the neighboring region of the land where it wasn't raining Genesis chapter 7 verse 20 perfectly reflects why this can't be describing a local flood, especially in the regions of the Black Sea or Mesopotamia. If the flood waters went above the mountains 15 cubits upward, then I have a question. Where did the water stop? Where is the flood zone radius? Where does Noah's local flood region begin and end? And why didn't the people just go to dry land? But more importantly, how would the water just stop 15 cubits above the mountains if the flood was supposed to kill all the wicked people where Noah lived? Genesis chapter 7 verse 21 through 22 explains why a local flood is actually ridiculous. Genesis chapter 7 verse 21 through 22 reads, "All flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beast and every creeping thing and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. All that was on the dry land died. He destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things and birds of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive." These verses are pretty straightforward, saying that every animal and man, even birds, died on all the face of the earth that had the breath of life, except for those that were on the ark. If the flood was local, why didn't people and animals just move to the part of the earth that wasn't flooding? Again, the flood waters went above 15 cubits above the mountains, so they could have just walked to the opposite side of the flood, but you can probably see why this is ridiculous. But again, if the flood was global, the flood waters went above the mountains all over the planet, 15 cubits high. Then it makes sense that every animal and man, even birds, died all over the face of the earth, except for those on the ark. But let's read chapter 8 for even more understanding.
Chapter 8. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. And the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand, and took her, and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came in to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more.
Genesis chapter 8 verse 3 says, "The waters receded continuously from the earth." Again, doesn't sound like a local flood. Genesis chapter 8 verse 9 makes it clear that the whole world had to have been under the water, because when Noah sent out a dove, it couldn't find a resting place. Genesis chapter 8 verse 9 reads, "The dove found no resting place for the sole of her feet. She returned into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth." If the flood was local, such as around the Black Sea region or Mesopotamia, should have found a resting place even outside of Noah's flood zone, considering that birds can fly hundreds of miles. But if the flood was global, then it makes sense as to why the bird couldn't find a resting place.
And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, was the earth dried. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou, and thy wife, and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after their kinds, went forth out of the ark.
Genesis chapter 8 verse 13 reads, The waters were dried up from the earth. The following verse, Genesis chapter 8 verse 17, makes it clear why these animals were saved and that the flood wasn't local. Genesis chapter 8 verse 17 reads, Every living thing of all flesh, birds, cattle, and creeping things, be fruitful and multiply on the earth. These animals were saved to repopulate the earth. If it were a local flood, why would Noah have to save all these animals if more existed outside of the local flood zone? Now the next verse makes it clear to me why the flood couldn't have been local.
And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living, as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease.
In Genesis chapter 8 verse 21, the Most High says himself, Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. The Most High said himself that he would never destroy every living thing. If this is a local flood, then it makes no sense, because many times in scriptures, the Most High has destroyed everything living in local areas, from entire cities like in Sodom and Gomorrah to even entire armies like the Egyptians and the Assyrians. So when the Most High says in chapter 8 verse 21, Nor will I destroy every living thing as I have done, is the Most High speaking about a local region, or is he talking about the world? The terminology seems to imply the world, which makes way more sense. Now let's look at chapter 9.
Chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man. At the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein.
The following verse makes it clear why the flood wasn't local, because the aftermath of the events. In Genesis chapter 9 verse 1, the Most High tells Noah's family, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. This makes sense if all of mankind was wiped out and only Noah's family survived. they have to repopulate the earth. But if it was a local flood, then Noah's family wouldn't have to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, especially if other people already existed outside of the flood zone. This same logic also applies to animals. In Genesis chapter 9 verse 2 through 5 makes it clear why the flood was global. Genesis chapter 9 verse 2 through 5 says, "The fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood." The problem with the local flood idea is this. After the flood, animals will fear Noah and his family, and it's okay to eat meat as long as it doesn't have blood in it. When the Most High told Noah this blessing, was this only given to Noah and his family? If other humans existed outside of Noah's local area, is it forbidden for them to eat meat because the blessing wasn't given to them by the Most High? Furthermore, would animals fear other humans outside of Noah's family? Is it okay for these other humans to eat animals with blood in it? If other humans existed outside of Noah's flood zone, do they also receive these blessings by the Most High? Genesis chapter 9 verse 5 through 7 pushes this point further. Genesis chapter 9 verse 5 reads, "The hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man, his blood shall be shed." This is basically a law the Most High gave to Noah that if a man kills another man, it's punishable by death. But if other humans existed outside of Noah's locality, do they also receive this law? Or is it okay for them to murder each other? After all, the Most High is only telling Noah these things. But Genesis chapter 9 verse 7 to me indicates that there are no other humans on the planet but for Noah's family, and that Noah's family is a type of new Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 9 verse 7 says, "Be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply in it," which is an interesting parallel given to Adam and Eve when they were told to multiply and fill the earth. Noah's family must repopulate the earth. If the flood was local and other humans existed outside of Noah's territory, then why would the Most High command Noah to be fruitful and multiply on the earth? It makes sense if Noah and his family are the only humans left after the global flood.
And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark, to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, This is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth.
Genesis chapter 9 verse 8 through 11 reads, Behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your descendants, and with every living creature, every beast of the earth. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Again, I ask, does this sound like a local flood? There has been many local floods near the Black Sea, Mesopotamia, and all over the planet. So if someone were to say Genesis chapter 8 verse 11 is referring to a local flood, then is the Most High lying? There has always been local floods. So is Genesis chapter 8 verse 11 referring to a local flood or a global flood? One thing is for sure, there can never be more than one global flood, but there can be many local floods. This verse would make more sense if it's talking about a one-time event such as a global flood. But here's another question if you believe in a local flood idea and that other humans existed outside of Noah's flood zone. When the Most High gave Noah the promise of no more local floods, was this only given to Noah's family, but all other humans didn't receive this promise from the Most High? If you go with this interpretation that all humans received this promise, then the promise isn't true because there are still local floods to this day. But if you make this flood only for Noah's descendants, then it still makes no sense because, as I stated before, local floods happen all the time in the places where Noah's descendants would settle. But Genesis chapter 9 verse 12 through 17 makes it clear that the flood was global because of the sign. Genesis chapter 9 verse 12 through 17. The sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature. I set my rainbow in the cloud, the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. When the Most High told Noah this, that the rainbow is a sign that the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh in the local region of the Black Sea or Mesopotamia or the earth. Do we only see the rainbow as a sign around the Black Sea in Mesopotamia, or do we see this sign, this promise, all over the planet after it rains? Is this everlasting covenant between God and every living creature around the Black Sea or Mesopotamia or on the earth? I do not believe that the flood mentioned in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 is local. It clearly describes a global flood, and this covenant was between the Most High and Noah and all current humans that descend from Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. They are the type of new Adam and Eve, as described in Genesis chapter 9 verse 18 through 19.
And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the 3 sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread.
Genesis chapter 9 verse 18 through 19 reads, The sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From these the whole earth was populated. This does not sound local, but global. I believe all of humanity today descends from these 3 men, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All other humans died in the pre-flood world, which was different from our world today. All of the blessings given to Noah come to us as well, because we are all descendants of Noah. Conclusion and summary. The flood described in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 isn't a local event, but a global one. A plain reading of the text illustrates this fact. But not only that, we can even find evidence of a global flood all over the planet. I end with this. The Most High has the power to create and destroy. He destroyed the old world so thoroughly that at first glance of our modern world, it looks perfect. But an even greater and perfect world once existed, and through careful examination, we can see that our world is buried under another. The coal and the fossils we find in the ground is a reminder of how much the Most High hates sin, so ponder on that. But I'll also end with this. All of current humanity descends from Noah, the most righteous man of his generation. We all share a forefather who was righteous in the sight of the Most High. So ponder on that as well. Shalom.